Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Joining me for the first time in a while is Chris Hamill and Pato van Straten as a combo. Welcome back to the four. Today we are answering Cheeky Saturn's question, which is, do you think Haaland is going to move clubs in January? But before we get into that, just a quick reminder to subscribe to Eurofootball Daily and hit that notification bell to never miss a video. But obviously, 19-year-old RB Salzburg striker Erling Braut Haaland has become one of the most talked about players in world football after his exceptional start to the season. So he's got 27 goals in 20 games for the Austrian side. And basically, Bild are reporting that he's got a £17 million release clause in his contract, which is only available for this winter window. Hamill, I mean, what do you make of this news? Do you think it's legitimate? And what have you made of his season so far?
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything totally new to say about the season that he's having so far, because it's been pretty well documented, this explosive start, hasn't it? So from a playing perspective, we're probably going to go over well-trodden ground, but in terms of where he may end up, that's probably a slightly more interesting angle, and we're going to get stuck into that, aren't we? But just to provide you with a bit of context, yes, Bild are touting him quite heavily for a move to Borussia Dortmund now. He's been persistently linked with Manchester United, and the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer link is there, isn't it? He played under the Norwegian at Molde between 2017 and 2019, in which he scored around 20 goals in 50 appearances, so a pretty substantial amount. That's where he got his footballing education, so he might feel more comfortable working under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, although is Manchester United that attractive a proposition to go to at the moment as they kind of continue to struggle? The feel-good factor is back at a little bit, to an extent, after that victory over Tottenham Hotspur, but Dortmund probably guarantee... Are they guaranteed Champions League football more so than Manchester United? What do we think very quickly?
Yeah, I'd probably say so, yeah, at least this season.
Despite Gladbach being competitive, Leverkusen, yeah, probably still a shoo-in for Champions League football. So that might have some bearing on his decision, but Pat's going to get stuck into that in a minute. Last month, Norwegian paper, a publication I'm really familiar with, VG, claimed there are 11 major European clubs who are monitoring his progress. So it's not going to be easy to get his name on the dotted line in the winter window if that release clause is true. These clubs include Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Juventus, Chelsea, Manchester City, Arsenal, Valencia and Sevilla. I mean, apart from Sevilla, that pretty much sounds like the clubs that we draw titles from, doesn't it? Now, it's easy to see why these clubs are linked with him, and you guys probably know this already at home, but just entertain me for a second. So 15 goals and 4 assists in 13 league games, helping his side go 2 points clear at the top of the Austrian Bundesliga. So by no means a foregone conclusion, that league, despite their surplus of talent. And this is a side that really struggled to qualify for the Champions League, prior to this season. They had a couple of good runs in the Europa League, but there were sort of perennial failures when it came to the last qualification stage for Champions League football. And as a Celtic fan, I know all about that heartbreak. So the fans, one, ecstatic to be in Europe's elite competition, and two, ecstatic with their chances of making it to the last 16. I mean, Liverpool have to go over to Austria and win, don't they? Which is not an easy game, given the current form that they're in. And his Champions League form. His Champions League form is pretty scary, isn't it? 5 games, 8 goals, 1 assist. I think he has as many Champions League goals as Eden Hazard in 44 fewer games. I think only 2 players. Actually, no, he scored the most of any teenager, I think, in his... the only teenager, to score in 5 consecutive games. He scored the most goals in the competition in his first 5 games. I think pipping Harry Kane and Diego Costa, who were second on 7. And he scored 1 goal in every Champions League game. Like I've said, Robert Lewandowski, the only player edging him out in terms of leading the goal scoring charts. And his stats, his numbers suggest he can play at a higher level. 4.2 shots per game. That's crazy. I think maybe only Ronaldo is having more. I think he's averaging around 5, isn't he? Minamoto and Kwang, is it? They've been pretty handy in the competition as well. So shout out to them for their service, as they're pretty good in the creative department, aren't they? 0.9 key passes and 1.2 dribbles. So that's more shots than Aguero and Mbappe, to give you some context. Liverpool on 10 points, Napoli on 9 points, Salzburg on 7. So all still to play for. Now let's discuss something new? Because this Dortmund rumour is a late entry. He's kind of long been linked with Manchester United. Do you find the Dortmund one any more interesting, Pat?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the reason we're covering this is because of this supposed buyout clause, which has come to light this week. But yeah, I would much rather see him go to Dortmund, not just because I'm not a Man United supporter, but I also think Man United, they've got a young striker who's going to be there for a long time and is doing very well right now. Rashford's got 9 Premier League goals so far this season. He's got 4 assists as well, I think. And he's been excellent, especially since Martial came back. Now, don't get me wrong, there are holes in that time. In that side, they don't exactly have a surfeit of attacking talent. But I don't really see how Haaland comes in for a James or even for a Martial. Like, Haaland is an out-and-out striker. That is what he is. That's what he's good at. And actually, while you may think he's a really exciting talent and we have to get him if we can get him, you can also end up with a situation like Arsenal's, where you have 2 strikers who are very good, but then you kind of feel like you need to play them all the time, and you end up with a bit of an imbalanced team. I think they'd be better off going for a winger. And I also think the attack's kind of fine. Like, it's 6th best in the league by goals scored. That's not spectacular, but by shots on target, they're kind of 5th. I think that as Martial and Rashford start to play together a little bit more, they'll be absolutely fine. Dortmund, on the other hand, do have tons of attackers, but they don't have many out-and-out strikers. The only one they've really got is Paco. And Paco's had a lot of injuries. He's had an Achilles situation and a bunch of kind of irritations of muscular problems that have come up again and again. Missed 8 games last term, obviously. And so while he's scoring, I think it's a goal every 104 minutes, something like that, he can't necessarily be relied on. Marco Reus is going to age out. Brandt is kind of a bit of a hybrid midfielder attacker now, a little bit, in that almost similar to the way that Draxler has been used at PSG. They do have quite similar skill sets, I think. So, I don't know, that to me seems like a more likely landing spot for Haaland. But I can't see Leipzig just letting him go there without a fight, especially seeing as, by all accounts, or at least by Kicker's account, they could lose Timo Werner for 30 million euros at any time. It just seems like if he's going to go to Germany, Leipzig have got a better manager. They'll probably pay you more money. And I think they've got a better prospect of being competitive in the near future, unless Dortmund go and get, say, Marco Rose next summer. But that, again, is a sort of gamble on what you think a club might do after they buy you. Like, I'm not sure that entirely makes sense to me. If this is just for this window, this transfer fee, this buyout, I think you kind of have to take advantage of it because it's possible that it then elapses and in the summer, Salzburg say we want 60 mil or something. And people might say, okay, well, we're not going to pay that because you are still 19 and it's one great season. Because otherwise you just say, wait till the summer and see what your options are. But yeah, I think actually, like if I were Bayern Munich or something, I'd just go and get this done. Yeah, I'd go straight out. And
I'm kind of skeptical.
Or Juventus.
Juventus will certainly be interested. I think every top club in Europe's going to be interested. I'm just kind of skeptical that this clause even exists. To be totally honest, it seems totally ridiculous that they'd have a £17 million release clause in January, just for January. But builds are normally pretty reliable, at least with that sort of information. I mean, they called the Kovac sacking, way before that happened, although it's easy to cover the biggest club in Germany and get that right at that particular time. I'm kind of with Pat. I don't want him to go to Man United in January. Not from a selfish point of view, because as a Sunderland fan, I don't actually care personally. I just feel for his own development, like the best option would be Leipzig or Dortmund for him, really. I mean, you look at the work they've done with Sancho, look at the work that they've done with, Brun Larsen, Diallo, Akanji, young players that they've really developed into sort of potentially world-leading talents in a few years. And I feel like Dortmund might need this injection of sort of just a bit of cutting edge, to be honest. I've seen a lot of their games this year, and for all their possession, there feels like when Paco doesn't play, like there's a real lack of cutting edge. I think Marco Reus is on 6 goals in about 13 appearances. And Paco's just behind him, so is Sancho as well. But if they had an out-and-out striker in the mix, you'd feel like their title challenges would go through the roof. But I feel like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, everyone's going to be interested in Haaland because he is seemingly sort of a once-in-a-couple-of-year talent that comes along. And he feels like a man against boys in that Austrian Bundesliga. I was watching some of his highlights this morning. Like, he needs to move eventually, but, I mean, it just feels like if this release clause is in existence, now is the time to really strike. And I feel like Liverpool would potentially be interested as well.
I was just thinking Liverpool.
Yeah.
If they win the league, if they're confident they're going to win the league come January or the end of January, if they're in a more commanding position or a similar position, then they might want to switch things up. When better to switch things up than when kind of you're on top. Firmino, they might be looking to, what is he, 28 now?
Yeah.
They might be starting to think about either cashing in on him or a slight change of system to make them a little bit more unpredictable next season. And 17 mil. I mean, it's certainly a snippet on the money they were prepared to pay for Timo Werner, right? Which was up to 50 last year, I believe. So,
yeah. It's just, I mean, it's massive credit to RB Salzburg again with finding this fantastic talent in Norway, as they've done throughout their scouting network. They picked up Hwang Hee-chan from Pohang Steelers, etc. Massive credit to them, but I just can't believe that they'd have this clause in a contract. Like, it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. But it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see where he ends up. Pat, could you imagine him? We've seen Bayern Munich potentially with they've talked about a potential striker to replace Lewandowski in the long term. Do you feel like he might overtake sort of Timo Werner in their pecking order of who to replace Lewandowski? Do you feel like he'd be a good option there?
Yeah, I mean, if his price is similar to Werner, sure. Like, I think either one, you can't really go wrong with. You could argue that Haaland would be a little bit more like for like than Lewandowski, maybe. He's a bit more of a physical presence and he can have people play around him, whereas Werner has pulled out wide a lot more. On the other hand, Werner's got superior creative numbers, has been absolutely outrageous creatively this season. I don't know. Yeah, I'd happily go for him, but I think if you do, then you're going to have to make some pretty straightforward promises about his playing time, because he's going to say, well, look, Lewandowski's having the season of his life. You're clearly going to keep him as your first choice striker for the next few years, or for at least next year. So what's happening to me? Am I going to play in the league and he plays in the Champions League? Are you going to play two up front? Like, what is the system going to be? And I think that Haaland, the great thing about where he is that he's in a position to say, if you can't really make the promises that I want to hear, then I won't come to you.
It's a hard sell, isn't it, to a youngster with the world at his feet to be Lewandowski's understudy for the next 2 years when he probably feels ready right now to make an impression.
Yeah.
And with 11 clubs chasing you, you're in a very strong position to negotiate a certain amount of minutes. I think I'd rather... Atletico Madrid was an interesting shout. If Alvaro Morata can't really make good of his sort of underlying numbers, his expected goals and assists have been fine for a while, but that hasn't bore out the reality. It hasn't amounted to that in reality, has it? So they might be thinking about Diego Costa's pretty much got to go. If they can get any money for Diego Costa, if they can get one last payday from China for him or Brazil, they have to, because he's just soaking up wages, isn't he? And he cost them an arm and a leg. And then having Morata and Haaland compete for that kind of number 9 spot with Felix behind them is all of a sudden makes... And they're very good at doing that, aren't they? They're very good at kind of rejuvenating that forward line and taking strikers when they're on the cusp of... greatness might be a bit strong in Haaland's case, but certainly developing into very good players.
Yeah, definitely. And the good thing about him being 19 is I want him to be well advised with this move, because he's got so much time on his hands. So I'm kind of with you guys. Don't necessarily go for a Bayern Munich or even a Barcelona or a Real Madrid. You've got so much time. I'd go Dortmund or Leipzig if I was him. But guys, we want to hear from you. If you were Haaland, where would you go? Let us know in the comments down below. Got to be done in winter. £17 million. What a bargain. Let's move on to Big Match Preview. Big Match Preview this weekend. Obviously, we could have talked about Gladbach versus Bayern Munich, which is taking place tomorrow afternoon, but it was only 3 weeks ago that we did Bayern versus Dortmund in this section of the show. So instead, we are profiling Inter Milan versus Roma, which takes place tonight in a few hours at the San Siro. This game sees first take on fifth in a massive clash. And weirdly, because I started with Chris on the last section, Pat, talk to me about the visitors Roma.
Yeah, well, weirdly, no one's really talking about Roma this season, because they kind of had an underwhelming start. They only won 3 of their opening 8. They had 4 draws in there. And yeah, everyone kind of was just like, oh, this is going to be one of those seasons for Roma. But they've really recovered. The last 6, they've got 5 wins. And they've only conceded 5 goals in that time while scoring 14. So it actually looks like Paulo Fonseca is starting to get them playing kind of the right way. They're 5th. They're level on points with Cagliari, who are in 4th, which is clearly
don't expect that.
That's not going to last. But they're probably going to go through their Europa League group as well, alongside Gladbach, because they're in there with Istanbul Başakşehir, and Wolfsberger, who are not Wolfsburg, the German side. They're Wolfsberger, the Austrian
They're
side.
very much the Austrian side.
But there's been an improvement across the board. Like, I mean, they're taking slightly fewer shots than last year, but they're also conceding vastly fewer. So they're like a plus 4.5 shots a game side, which is pretty good. I think they're third in expected goals for, third in expected goals against, third by expected points. So they just generally are pretty solid. And they've conceded 15 goals so far. Last season, it took them only 11 games to concede 15 goals. And like I said, they've only conceded 5 of those in the last 6. So it's really that poorish start to the season which has seen them concede so many. So actually, like, if you look at the table of the numbers now, you could even argue those are a little bit misleading. They're actually a bit better than that because their form has been so good lately. They're still pretty reliant on Edin Dzeko.
I know.
He's their top scorer.
And Kolarov as well.
Kolarov,
Yeah, well, he's got 6 goals and an assist, Dzeko. But Zaniolo's got 3, Kluivert's got 3, Kolarov has got 4, but it's not like they're not really reliant on Kolarov. Like, Kolarov's got those goals, but there are 7 players in the squad taking over 2 shots a game. And I'd actually say that, to me, that the linchpin of the side is Lorenzo Pellegrini now. We've been talking about him for a while, but this season he's gone from being a really hot prospect to being pretty much a superstar. I mean, so far this season, 2.4 tackles and interceptions. That's not bad. It's not amazing, but given the rest of his numbers, 2.3 shots, 3.3 key passes, 1.6 dribbles. Is he 23 yet? I'm not actually sure he is.
That's incredible.
And he's one of 3 players averaging over 2 key passes a game, along with Mkhitaryan and Kolarov. So I think, you look at the talent in that squad. There is a lot of talent, but it's kind of weirdly distributed. And you think, okay, if they get a good striker to take over after Dzeko, if they can get in, like a top class left back
Maybe
or
a
left
Haaland.
winger. Yeah, exactly. A Haaland would be amazing for a Roma, right?
Yeah, that'd be so much fun.
Go to Roma and just agree like a 70 mil buyout or something. Why not? But I do genuinely think that the way I want to look at it maybe is not that they're reliant on Dzeko, but that they are getting really big production out of a very old Dzeko, which makes me think that if they had a decent young striker, they could get even better production. And so I think that this has actually been a really impressive managerial performance from Fonseca, and this will not be a walk in the park for Inter at all.
Definitely. It's quite exciting, that crop of young talent. I mean, we talk about Dzeko, we talk about Kolarov, but there's obviously Zaniolo, Cengiz Under, Justin Kluivert as well, who's really sort of come to the fore this year. Pellegrini, Brian Cristante, Diawara. So there's plenty of young talent in there as well, but it's just the old boys just keep on doing it. And Chris Smalling has been immense at the start of this year. Smaldini, as they're now terming him in Italy. And
that is pretty
so.
good.
It's class.
That is pretty good.
And what a story. Well done, Chris Smalling. And well done as well, just briefly to touch on it, on dealing with that horrendous racist headline in Corriere dello Sport. We're going to now banish that from Eurofootball Daily. What a horrendous headline, and well dealt with that, Lukaku and Smalling. Just can't believe in this day and age that someone, had the, it's not even the audacity, just the stupidity and just wrong to put that as a headline. It must have gone through quite a few people, which is even more depressing. But anyway,
Italy.
on with that, Italy. Chris, the hosts, Inter Milan, in contrast, top of the league, and everyone's pretty excited. Come on, Inter Milan.
Yeah, they're absolutely firing.
Over Juventus, don't do that smirk.
Oh, come on.
On all cylinders,
Yeah,
aren't
but
they?
if you're going to pick somebody, pick Atalanta.
Yeah, true.
They're legit fun.
Yeah, but they are just perpetual kind of bottlers, aren't they?
They're so much better than it. So are Inter, though. Like, what have Inter done?
So are Napoli. Everyone but Juve.
So is Conte, arguably, if the Champions League's anything to go by.
Yeah, we will touch upon their Champions League form in a minute, but it would be refreshing for someone but Juve to win the league.
Yes.
However, I will accept Juve winning the league this year solely because Maurizio Sarri deserved a Scudetto with Napoli.
Yes.
So it would make it easier to digest on that front. But yeah, I would like someone new to win Serie A. Atalanta, Gasparini, what a servant he's been to Italian football. That'd be really fun, but it's not going to happen unless
Everyone's favourite.
Luis Muriel continues to score a rate of absolute knots. Or Zapata comes back and they're just like the deadliest duo in Europe. Okay, back to Inter Milan then, because they have had a fantastic start to the season, haven't they? Winning 12 of 14 games. The only ones they didn't win was that 2-1 loss to Juve, which is a fairly attritional game. And then that 2-2 draw with Parma. They both came in October, so a bit of a rough month for them, given their lofty standards at the start of the campaign. Since that 2-2 draw, they've actually won 5 on the bounce, scoring 11 goals, only conceding 4 in the process. And that sounds about right. They sound like Conte numbers, don't they? Nothing sensational, but solid victories. They've also recovered to an extent in the Champions League because they had a horrific opening couple of match weeks, didn't they? So they actually had 1 point after, 2 games, drawing with Slavia Prague and losing away to Barcelona. They then won 2 of the next 3 in the competition and sit on 7 points. So they actually have to, I think they have to better, Dortmund's result when they play Barcelona. Of course, Dortmund are playing Slavia Prague. Barcelona might play a B team, so it might give them some hope.
Yeah, because I think El Clasico is the following week.
And it's in Italy, right?
But Conte's failings in the Champions League, short of a seismic shift in that group, are going to continue here. And I don't think they've actually qualified for the last 16 since the 11-12 season when they were eventually knocked out by Marseille. Let's have a look at some of their underlying numbers, then I'll get on to some of their star players. They're taking 17.9 shots a game at the moment and putting 6.3 on target. So they're both Champions League sort of numbers in Serie A. I think about 4th, just to give you a little bit of context. So there's definitely room for improvement there. I think they've probably got progressively better as Lukaku's settled into the side more, and him and Lautaro Martinez are they're putting together a more productive partnership week on week, aren't they? At the start of the season, I think in the opening 5 or 6 games, Lukaku was actually taking under 2 shots, which was surprising because he's kind of always been a really solid 3-shot a game striker. I don't think anywhere in his career, maybe short of international level, he's really exceeded 4.5. So once he gets back to regularly hitting between 3 and 4, I imagine they'll sort of go second for that metric, 2nd or 3rd. Although Napoli and Atalanta are always taking loads of shots, aren't they? They concede 12.2 a game, which is 5th. Maybe a little bit more surprising given how good Conte is as a defensive manager. But actually, when you look a little bit closer, expected goals has them at as the best defence in Serie A. So they're obviously conceding a decent amount, but low quality. These might be from distance, owing to that sort of packed defence. Defend their box generally very, very well, don't they? That back 3, kind of Skriniar, Godin, De Vrij, exceptional individuals, and starting to play like a real cohesive unit together. So that's where you've got to look at the kind of underlying numbers and the expected goals together to give yourself a fair representation of how a team is doing. So, like I said, conceding a fair amount of shots, but not high quality ones. Key men, Lukaku. I mean, Lukaku's got 10 goals in 14 league games. So he's made the start that we all thought he kind of deserved, actually, after a bit of a rough ride at Manchester United, and he wasn't getting very much respect, I almost want to say, in the press. People were
It became a bit of a meme.
Detracting from what he'd done, before the age of 24, 25, which was score an absolute shed load of goals. And he's now facing press of a different sort, which you've touched upon, and is far more. We condemn that in a far more damning way, but. Handled that pretty well, mate, so we'll move on from that. Martinez, what a revelation he's been this season. 5 goals in his last 3 games for Inter. 13 in 19 when you couple that with UCL games as well. So 5.5 shots up from 4.2. He's the one out of the forward pairing that takes those snapshots. He's got that little shift in him, hasn't he? You can buy himself a yard in maybe the way that Lukaku can't, because Lukaku's he's not as mobile. He's certainly stronger. When he cuts out to the right, he's just blitzing fullbacks in Serie A for fun, making absolute chowder of them. Is that a saying? Yeah, we'll roll with it.
I like it.
Lautaro Martinez, 0.79 expected goals and assists. His expected goals is actually only bettered by 6 players in Italy. So yeah, just a little insight into some of the key men there. We've not even mentioned likes of Brozovic, who's just always an absolute boss at the base of that midfield. Sensi, who's kind of putting up very similar numbers to Pellegrini, who you mentioned before. Pellegrini, sorry. Pellegrini, sort of a two-way midfielder in the truest sense. So I think it's going to be a really good match, and I'm a big fan of Fonseca and how he's kind of turned that whole situation around at Roma, because at one point they were considering taking Jack Rodwell on a short-term deal, weren't they, which would have been horrific.
Lol.
They were that short in supply, they turned to Jack Rodwell, but Mkhitaryan's come back, he's scored, the team are looking decent again, so by no means a foregone conclusion, but I do think Inter are going to edge it, lads. Probably the classic Conte scoreline of 2-1.
Fair. I mean, they don't have a good record in this fixture whatsoever. Doing a bit of research, they've actually had 3 consecutive draws in the last 3 league meetings, but they've only won 3 of their last 16 league fixtures. drawing 7 and losing 6, but they are a very different proposition this year, of course. Inter have also got a few injuries as well. Gagliardini's out, Sensi, Alexis Sanchez and Barella is out. Barella and Sanchez out until 2020. Barella in particular, a massive loss for them. Roma, Javier Pastore is a doubt. I actually completely forgot that he was even at Roma, to be totally honest. Brian Cristante and Zappa Costa are also long-term absentees. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating. But yeah, as I said, Inter do feel like a different proposition. So Chris is going 2-1 Inter. Pat, what do you reckon?
Inter have been pretty bad in the big games. They're pretty bad against Juve. They're pretty bad against
Scrape
Barcelona
past
in the
Milan,
second
yeah.
half, and they're really bad in the second half against Dortmund. I might go draw. I'll say 2-2.
Fair. Ooh, thriller. I'm going to go 2-0 to Inter Milan. I just feel like at home they'll have the edge on this. But yeah, that's our big match preview. Make sure you get your score predictions in the comments down below. Let's move on to quickfire questions. Our quickfire question comes in from FC Cesc, and they've asked, should Diego Simeone remain as Atletico coach? I thought this was a potentially interesting one. Well done, FC Cesc. Very good question. Lads, what do we make of this? Because I'm actually angling towards Diego Simeone. He's not come to the end of his tenure, and he deserves an enormous amount of respect for the job he's done there. But I don't think a change of manager would be the worst idea, at least a change of style. I mean, do you guys agree with that? Chris, I can see you shaking your head.
I'd be an exceptionally brave shout. Numbers-wise, they are the third best team in Spain right now, aren't they? Which is where I think, short of having another massive summer, they belong at this point. You know, talent-wise, I think it's fair to say that they don't hold the edge over Barcelona or Real Madrid. We thought that their best opportunity to win the league was last year. I don't think they should have mixed it up there. And I think this is one of those scenarios where, unless a manager of unbelievable calibre becomes available, and I'm trying to think of some names now, I'm ruminating over, the likes of maybe an Allegri.
Allegri seems like quite a
Allegri might be on the level,
fit.
and his profile, his defensive brand of football suits the club. But then, is that a case of just continuing the success that Diego Simeone has achieved there? How do you better a club that's so geared to one manager without kind of a catastrophic kind of 1 or 2 year period? It just has to be one of the best 3 managers in the world right now, because Simeone is definitely one of the best 10.
Yeah.
So if Pep, imagine Pep at Atletico Madrid, that'd be absolutely ridiculous. Or
Coca and
or
Sal
Klopp,
would love
or
it.
Klopp. Who better? Or Pochettino might be an interesting deviation. Like that might be a situation that you can understand. Atletico Madrid being like, okay, has this. There's certainly been 2 or 3 generations of players which have come and gone. If we want to remain competitive, do we need to freshen things up? Let's beat Real Madrid to the drop when it comes to this guy. That I can rationalise, but I tread very carefully, if you're the Atletico hierarchy, because what they have now is pretty darn sweet.
Yeah, 100%. As you say, deserves an enormous amount of credit. Champions League finals, Europa League wins, title wins in Spain as well. And I feel like they're maybe halfway through a complete rebuild as well. You obviously saw in the summer they got rid of Juanfran, Godin, Felipe Luis, Diego Costa's aging out as well. And it feels like there's another big summer in there, and then, and Griezmann obviously left as well. Another big summer in there, and then they could potentially be, well, they're in the title mix this year. No one's running away with it in Spain, but at least consistently back in and amongst the title mix. I just feel like, I don't know, I'm slightly bored of Atletico Madrid, at least watching them. And I don't know whether just a style, from a selfish point of view, a style shift would be, better viewing. Pat, are you on my wavelength, or are you more on Hamill's?
I understand where you're coming from, but they're not going to get rid of it.
I'm not articulating it very well. I'm a bit fed up.
We're working this out as we go, aren't we?
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where, I think Atleti fans are happy with what the club is. Like they're a good side who can occasionally beat the big teams, and maybe once every few years they really, really compete for the title, and the rest of the time they're a Champions League side. They've had 2 Champions League finals and a title win, in the last, 6-7 years. And I think that most Atleti fans think that that's pretty much as good as it gets. So I agree, that they sometimes have a tendency to half-arse transfers. So they'll go out and get a bunch of guys you really love, and it's great that Thomas Partey's come in kind of full-time this season. They went to spend a huge amount on João Felix, but then they go and get, say, Felipe in to play centre-back, and you or Trippier in at right-back, and as good as Trippier's been, you still kind of think, this is a little bit
Is that a title-winning side?
You're not quite doing what you should do.
Yeah. Does he need a little bit more help with transfers? Like, can Diego Simeone finesse, the profile of who he brings in? Most certainly. That's quite an interesting question. Have they got who's their existing sporting director?
That's a very good
I mean,
question.
that is.
You're really
If
testing.
you- if one of you guys could
Is it
pull
not
that
Berta? Is it not
I
Andrea
literally
Berta?
have no idea. I'd be lying if I said
I think it's an Italian guy called Andrea Berta.
Can they get can they bring in a manager
He's very good though.
who's going to better the results? Probably not. But can they sign players in a more coherent way? Maybe, like bringing Diego Costa back for 60 mil. I would be firing whoever presided over.
And
that.
Vitolo
But this is all Simeone. That's all Simeone. Like Simeone works for like really closely with like the director of football. And Simeone basically gets who he wants. Like he was the one who pushed for Gaetan. Like he wanted Diego Costa back. He wanted like a bunch of these guys to come back. And then he was the one who refused to phase out Felipe Luis and Juan Fran. So I mean, you could argue that might be a way to move the club forward, that you've got a manager there who can essentially exert as much control as he wants over so many aspects of the club's business, that the way to move forward might be to modernise the structure a little bit more and have somebody who has less control. You could make that argument. However...
But could you do that with him in charge?
No, I don't think so.
You think just too omnipotent, too like Wenger in that sense, and he's probably one of the few managers in world football, isn't he, that still retains that amount of power. But you can see why, given they were in the second division in Torres's first stint there, which was 15 years ago. Like this is a club. I mean, is there a similar story in the Premier League, like Leicester, but without the continued success?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's very easy to sit here like I have just done and say like, oh, they need to change style, whatever. New manager will probably help that, but I think he's had the best defence in 6 of his 7 years. They've routinely had one of the best defences in Europe. I think only Atletico Madrid have conceded fewer goals than them this season. So it's very easy, to sit here and just say like, oh, change style, whatever. Probably a bit annoying from me, but we want to hear from you, Atletico Madrid fans and Spanish football fans in general. Does Diego Simeone need to be replaced? What do they need to change going forward? Let us know in the comments down below. And lads, let's roll straight into the M board. Chris, what should they go and do now?
Download the latest few podcasts.
Yes.
The Extra Time podcast is live right now, and go and check out Stat Wars, because Jackson and this man played in the final, didn't they?
Indeed, coming out tomorrow. Hugely exciting. Anything from you,
No,
Pat?
that's it.
Nice. Watch the final tomorrow. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great weekend.
Oh, the final's out tomorrow, my bad.
Bye.